Let's take a look at one of our top stories for today that we are looking at. And this is based on a report that was recently released by the World Health Organization. It says shouting at children may be as damaging to development as sexual or physical abuse. That's according to a study by the University of College London, and it follows findings by, as I said earlier, a WHO, that childhood emotional abuse has increased while physical and sexual abuse have declined. Let's speak to the Teddy Bear Clinic's director, Shaheda Omar, about this. Shaheda, good to have you on the SA Morning today. Tell us more about these findings. What actually constitutes abuse when it comes to shouting at children?
Well, I think one needs to understand any form of abuse, especially referring to the study where they spoke specifically to verbal abuse. And underlying, verbal abuse, it constitutes emotional abuse. So it affects the child mentally, certainly the child's perceptions of himself or herself, eroding the child's sense of self-worth, undermining the child's self-esteem. So actually, reducing the child to feeling absolutely worthless. Often children feel bad because they feel they do not match up to the standards they expected to. And we find that this is a very common thing occurring both at home and within the educational institutions. And the intention of the verbal abuse is to put the child down. Simple words like, you'll never get it right. You know what, you're stupid, you'll never measure up to it. Or even telling the child, no matter how hard you try, I don't think you're going to get it right. So often children feel that that they do absolutely are useless, and it affects their self-esteem. So in the same way that sexual abuse, physical abuse affects the child, it impacts on the child's trajectory, the child's behavior, it impacts on the child's physical state, where children start manifesting somatic conditions like headaches, stomach aches, and in the long term one would find that there's supporting evidence of depression, anxiety, and other emotional conditions.
So, Shaheda, if we could just ask, where does one draw the line, and what actually constitutes verbal abuse? Is it shouting at a child who maybe has done something and you're not happy with what they're doing, or a child who's not listening to the directions or the instructions that you're giving them? Because I think it's a very fine line sometimes. And at what point does it move from trying to discipline the child, trying to instill some sort of order within the house, to that abuse?
So we need, you speak about the fine line, and I think one needs to look at the intention behind the action. And when the intention is to hurt the child, harm the child, and inflict injury on the child emotionally, definitely that constitutes verbal abuse, it constitutes emotional abuse. So shouting at the child and ensuring that, you're actually following routines, setting limits, regulating behaviors, there's a difference there. But deliberately humiliating, ridiculing, and shaming a child certainly constitutes abuse.
So if it constitutes abuse, are there likely going to be some sort of legal ramifications for a child who says that they have been verbally abused by a parent or an adult?
Well, that's very difficult often, because we realize that constitutes underlying one of the emotions is emotional abuse, and it's not always easy to identify, or it's not always tangible, because the person inflicting or harming that child, it's his word or her word against the child's word. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed quite urgently, because we are finding more and more children who are suffering as a result of this kind of abuse.
So, Shaheda, traditionally what happens with reports of this nature, the WHO has come out with these findings. What then is the action that follows reports like this?
Well, there are protocols within the educational institutions, and we are regulated by the Children's Act, where we look at the best interests of the child, promoting the best interests of the child. And certainly within the school structure, if it is reported to the HOD. The school then is expected to investigate, and if they find cause for action, then a disciplinary would be brought forward. So there is recourse, but it's not something that occurs frequently. It's more an exceptional situation. I think with regard to physical and sexual abuse, yes, we are finding that there is more frequent recourse and action to that kind of behavior. But verbal abuse is still very much underground. It's not actually addressed or attended to as we would like it to be.
What was quite interesting as well is that there has been a decline in physical as well as sexual abuse. Talk to us about the factors that might have led to this. Is it a decline in the numbers reported, or is there a decline in the incidences actually taking place?
So I just want to say that even though they say there's a decline, we continue to see children who, are victims of physical abuse, sexual abuse. Yes, there might be a situation where children are not coming forward and reporting. Fear of reprisal, fear of the outcome often deters them from reporting. So it's, although the statistics say it's on the decline, I actually, in practice, in clinical settings, we're not seeing that. We're actually finding that children are manifesting symptoms which are contributed by sexual and physical abuse.
Thank you so much, Shaheda Omar, for your time today. And a really important point that you bring out, that sometimes the statistics may say one thing, but your experience on the ground says something completely different, especially if you are continuing to see children being physically and sexually abused, and yet the numbers say something different. That is the director at the Teddy Bear Clinic, Shaheda Omar. Thank you so much for your time.